give a brief backstory here, but before I dive into that, for everybody that's on the call right now, I do want this to be a conversation. I want to, I hope that the goal here is that with some things that I share in the very beginning, I'm going to walk through a basic kind of opening monologue, if you will. And then as you have questions, go ahead and just put those in the chat. Between Eric and myself, we're going to be monitoring the chat and going through the questions, because what I have learned about myself in the almost 15 years of being an advisor is that brevity is not a strong quality of mine. So I will take up this entire hour, and I could do it in almost one breath if given the opportunity. So I'm not going to I don't want to do that. I can do that, but I want this to be about you as the OD on the call right now. I want this to be about you and to answer your questions. So this is going to kind of be like rapid fire Q&A, so to speak. As many questions as we can get in here, I want to make sure that we give you the information that you need to take the next best step. That's kind of paraphrasing in a little twist on anybody on the call here that has young children. Our daughters are 7.5, and we've got our younger daughter is going to turn 4 in about 2 weeks. And Frozen 2 is very popular in our household right now. And towards the end of the song, there is, or towards the end of the movie, there's a part where Anna does her song called "The Next Right Thing," and that, I think, is kind of the mantra and the way in which all of the content that we put out at Integrated Planning and Wealth Management, both in the writing that I do, the speaking around the country that I do. I've got a busy circuit coming up here over the next 6 weeks where I'm going to be at some national conferences. If you're going to be at Vision Expo, let me know. If you're going to be at SECO, let me know. There's a couple of other places that I'm going to be. So again, hit me up on LinkedIn. We're going to do some podcast recordings for 2020 Money. So all of that information, some live podcast recordings, all of that is done to help you, the optometrist and the practice owner, choose and make the next right thing, right? Do the next right thing with your finances, the next best thing, the next best right thing, right? So think of these questions, type them in the chat. We want this to be about you. Brief backstory, how I got into this. Like I said, I've been doing this almost for 15 years now, launched my own firm in 2011. We are a fee-only financial planning, integrated planning and wealth management is a fee-only fiduciary financial planning firm. That might be want, right, for ODs listening that don't know exactly what that means. Bottom line, we give advice, period. What we do is we help optometrists proactively manage cash flow, reduce taxes, and invest prudently. Simple. That's what we do. And we do that for the practice owner, realizing and acknowledging that the practice serves two purposes for the practice owner. It is a conduit for cash flow, and it's an asset on your personal balance sheet. And usually, at least early on in your practicing career, and even later on in your practicing career, it can be the biggest asset on your balance sheet. And so it's important to do the prudent and responsible planning. There's some alliteration for you at 9 o'clock Eastern on a Thursday night, to do some prudent, proper planning and proactive. There, I got 4 P's in there with your practice, so that when you decide to cash in those chips, right, relatively speaking, and you decide to turn your practice from the asset that it is on your personal balance sheet into something liquid that can provide cash flow to you when you transition into, up through, and onto retirement, that you've done the right things and you've extracted max value from the practice. I'm not a practice management consultant. That's why Eric's here. So we draw a very fine line in the sand on what we do for our practice owners and how we show up and help them. I always tell practice owners, when we're talking on the financial statements, now you're in my sandbox. Now that's our arena. And we're going to go through the P&L, the profit loss statement. We're going to go through the balance sheet. We're going to go through your statement of cash flow. We're going to look at the structure of the debt in the practice. We're going to evaluate what best way to purchase a piece of equipment. We're going to look at when and how does it make sense to purchase your building. We just talked with a practice owner today where we're doing a seller finance note. They're going to buy the building from the practice owner that they bought the practice from 3 years earlier. Unfortunate widow situation. She's ready to sell the building. So now we're helping, not broker the deal, but we're just helping structure the note of the deal so that everybody wins in that situation. All of these variables that you have are assets to you as a practice owner. And our goal is to help you make the right decision the first time. And we did that. We've had an intentional focus on working with practice owners around the country. I think we're up to 27 states right now is where our client base is. So the beautiful thing about modern technology, case in point, when you figure out how to unmute, because we did have almost a little bit of a glitch before we hit live.
Almost.
Sweating just a
but
little
we made
bit.
it through.
But we made it.
Hey, so I'm going to toss something out there. It sounds to me like the approach that you guys take, Adam, is in financial planning and in wealth planning and what have you, tax strategies. It's very hands-on. It sounds to me like you guys are very, very hands-on. Y'all aren't so much like just create a plan, send it off to the client, and so be it. You guys are very hands-on with your approach. So speak a little bit to that as far as like how you engage, your clients when they come and work with you guys, what level of hands-on are they getting with you that they may not be getting elsewhere?
So I'll put this through the filter of, and I appreciate the question because it's an important thing to understand. And I guess the philosophy that I would take through that question is that planning is a process, not an event. And what I mean by that is I used to do this. I'm guilty of it. Where early in my career as an advisor, we would print out these like 115-page packets, and they'd be in a nice leather-bound binder. And we'd sit across from a client. We'd say, "Mr. Client, Mrs. Client, here's your financial plan." And we'd thumb through and show all the pretty graphs and the spreadsheets and the projections. And then what I realized is that a week later, that plan was extinct because there's a little thing called life that happens. And so, especially for a practice owner, right? I own 2 businesses. I'm involved in a third. We've got a lot of different irons in the fire. My week changes, right? The nature of my business and our lives professionally can change week to week. And what I've learned in working with practice owners is that it is impossible for me to talk to you about your personal plan if we don't talk about the professional plan. One begets the other. It's this, we call it the integrated income cycle, trademark. It's this, we do. And so it's what you do in the business affects personally, and what you do personally affects business. And so our whole approach, and I'll say it's our approach, but I do want this to be, if anything, food for thought for ODs that are on the call that are either DIY investors, because I know there's some of you on the call, and I love the fact that you're doing that. I love the fact that you're taking ownership and empowerment over your own personal finances, and that you're using platforms like this to get the information to make those decisions on your own because you enjoy doing that. That's awesome. And I know there's others of you on the call that maybe have an existing relationship with an advisor, which is also awesome. We want you to do that as well. We want financial literacy and financial independence to become greater, impact at scale. That's why we have 2020 Money podcast. That's why we do things like this to create that. So anyway, my point in all of that is that planning is a process, not an event. And so proactively, what we've realized and what I encourage every OD on the call here to realize is it is much cheaper and you get a much better ROI if you are an author instead of a storyteller. And let me explain what I mean by that. An author is someone that sits down, blank page or computer screen, and proactively puts words on a paper and tells the story that they wish to tell. A storyteller is reading events that have already occurred. And so this is important from a practice owner standpoint when you're looking at all of the different advisors that you have in your life. And sometimes that might be you, right? If you're CPA, for example, no offense to any CPAs that are on the call here, but candidly, if you take offense to this and you're not doing this, then maybe that's a gentle nudge to maybe think about up-leveling the game. Looking at what has already happened in someone's practice and putting it on a tax return is telling a story, right? There's nothing that you can change. By the time you're putting numbers onto a tax return, the ability to, there are about 5 things that one can do after 12/31, but before April 15th, or I think it's 17th this year, that you can do to reduce your tax bill. Make a contribution to a traditional IRA if you qualify, make a profit sharing contribution to the business, max fund your HSA. Let's see, what am I missing? There's a couple more things that like a SEP IRA if you're a 1099 sole proprietorship, or you're a solo, you're the only employee where you have a SEP IRA or a solo 401k. There's a little bit of easier rules, if you will, on making post 31 but pre-filing contributions. My point is, in the absence of being proactive, you lose a lot of the arrows in the quiver that you can use or that you can utilize in your plan to use the practice back to that conduit of cash flow that I talked about, the ability to use the cash flow from that practice proactively and do one of 3 things with the cash flow. Invest it back into the practice, invest it in yourself, or spend it on your on-purpose life. And when we talk about spending on-purpose life, we can get into that maybe in a little bit of why that's so important to us and why we're so passionate about helping ODs. But
Sure.
from that monologue, take planning as a process, not an event. You have to be proactive with it.
Awesome. Excellent. Love every bit of it. Hey, would you mind also, you mentioned for those viewers that kind of may be sitting on some cash right now between December 31 and filing, go down that list again of what folks can totally fund tomorrow. They can hop on and go ahead and fund.
As a blanket statement, I'm going to have to take some of those away because there are some contingencies and some I's that you need to dot and T's that you need to cross. Bottom line, if you want to start peeling back the layers of the onion and see if you can do these things, low-hanging fruit, if you have a high deductible healthcare plan, fund your HSA, your health savings account, right?
Okay.
$7,100, I believe, was the amount in 2021. I think it's $7,200 here in 2022. If you have a retirement plan, or even if you don't have a SEP IRA, a simplified employee pension plan, and you're a sole proprietorship, you could have employees with the SEP IRA. It gets a little murky with contributions and things like that. But a SEP IRA is something to look at. I'm just going to give you the basics. We're not going to go deep into the details on all of these different vehicles. HSA, SEP IRA, traditional IRA is something that you could contribute to reduce your taxes. What did I miss here? If you're a profit sharing contribution to the practice, if you have a 401k, talk to your TPA, your third party administrator, who's the one responsible for kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's in your 401k. Ask them to run a profit sharing analysis to see what it would mean. How much money, let's say that I as a practice owner want to drop in $100,000 into my 401k. This is what we call the tax arbitrage conversation. If I have a 401k, I've got 9 team members. Let's say I'm a single OD or maybe a dual OD practice. I've got 7 or 8 team members, maybe 9 team members. I'm doing 1.8 million, 2 million in revenue, and I've got 150 grand kind of sitting on the sidelines that I'm not really sure what to do with here. Now we play the tax arbitrage game. Does it make sense if I take, just to use an example, if I take $100,000 and I go to my 401k provider and I say, how much would I, as the practice owner, be able to deposit in my personal 401k account if I drop $100,000 profit sharing into the plan? Because there are testing requirements, there's limits that have to be calculated, something called the ADP and ACP testing that have to be met, right? Your TPA is going to be doing all that work, candidly. That's why you pay them, is to do that work for you. And so what you do is, let's say out of that $100,000, you and your spouse, and we'll talk about this as a way to save on taxes and kind of keep more money in the family. Let's say your spouse is on payroll as well. Between both of you, you go through some calculations and realize that out of that $100,000, the two of you might be able to keep, let me use an extreme example, $75,000. Well, that's a pretty good deal, right? I get to give my employees $25,000, and in return for that, I get to keep $75,000 in my own account, and I don't have to pay taxes on it right now. I'm getting the tax, I'm deferring the taxes. On the other side of that, we say, I don't want to do that. Okay, now how much am I going to pay in effective taxes to take that $100,000 home, so to speak, right? If I'm in a 33% effective tax bracket, well, I'm going to have to pay $33,000 to the federal government and then keep $67,000. So you just kind of do that math and figure out at the end of the day, where's going to be the best bang for my buck? Where's the best dollar? The key to that, though, like you had said, Eric, you got to have the cash on the sidelines. You've got to have all of the things that I talked about are what we call hard dollar benefits in tax planning, meaning in order to get the tax benefit, you got to come up with cash. It's not like a cost segregation study where you can utilize amortization and depreciation, which don't quote unquote cost you anything to get, but it does have a tax reduction strategy to it. Does that make sense?
Sure, totally. Okay. I think you're the expert, right? No, it totally does. But I mean, look, the fact is, Adam, look, you're bringing up a great point. Everyone works very hard in their practices to grow the practice, to find ways to be more profitable, and are looking for these vehicles outside of the practice. I mean, really great stuff. So, hey, help me understand this. You know, I know there's a sizable and growing population of younger optometrists out there who maybe at this stage of the game don't necessarily have like huge cash reserves sitting on the sideline, but, you know, planning for their future is certainly important, as many of them have, ambitions of getting into private practice, ambitions of finding partner opportunities, what have you. So, speak a little bit as it pertains to those, younger professionals, the under 40 crowd, if you will, and what kind of steps they can start to make right now, and how your practice may serve them as well.
So this is something that I'm really passionate about helping ODs understand, because if they're even remotely plugged into personal finance and they start reading, you should have this much money by the age of 30 and you should be this wealthy, your net worth should be this much. Like, it can be very easy to think that you are really behind the power curve and behind the eight ball, because I call it like kind of the 3-strike rule. ODs have 3 strikes against them. OD practice owners, excuse me, have 3 strikes against them that the vast majority of other Americans don't have against them. Number one, your education took 4, possibly 5 years longer if you did a residency compared to anybody else getting a bachelor's degree. Number two, that education costs a decent amount of money. So one of two things is happening. Either you're allocating a significant amount of money in the first 5 years post-education to aggressively paying down your student loan debt, and thus you're quote unquote losing out on even more years that you could be saving for retirement. And then number three, the other side of that coin, I really would never advise this, they decide to take 20 years to pay off their student loans. In today's interest rate environment, it would not make sense to take 20 years to pay off your student loans just because of the interest rate expense to that. But if some do that, now you've got 20 years of $1,200, $1,300, $1,500 a month that you're shipping off to student loans. Now, you got a good education and you're making good money for it. It was an investment in yourself, but it's that much less cash flow that you have to build your net worth statement. The third strike against you as a practice owner is, right, let's run that timeline. You're in your mid-20s, you graduate, you start practicing in July after you pass boards and you get your certificate, et cetera. Now you start with the practice. Maybe you practice for 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years. Best case scenario, the practice that you're at offers you partnership and then the opportunity to succeed the practice owner. Worst case scenario, failed succession plan, you go out on your own, you do a cold start, or you go find another broker and you buy a practice. Now you're in your early 30s, 30, 33, something like that, and you've got student loan debt. I joke with ODs, you can write three checks and be in debt for $1 million, right? Your student loans, your house, and then you buy or start a practice. And so what happens is you face these headwinds for the first part of your career as you're going up this mountain called financial independence. And it can create some anxiety. We've had conversations with ODs that feel a little anxiety as they're going, because they're like, I don't have the cash flow to do all the things that I hear you talking about on 2020 money. And I'm like, that's okay. And here's why. Because I have story after story after story of successful practice owners in their late 30s, early to mid 40s that have done all the right things. They've paid off the debt. They've done the practice note on a 10-year loan and paid it off more aggressively. They paid off their student loans. Their mortgage is on a 15-year note instead of a 30-year note, and they haven't, quote unquote, outkicked their coverage. They haven't let lifestyle creep get in the way of financial independence. So as they pay off more and more debt in the practice, that's just more freestanding cash flow that they can now use to invest. We have some of our practice owners in their mid to late 40s that are funding their brokerage account to the tune of $15,000 a month into their account because the practice is profitable. So they're in what we call shampoo bottle mode: lather, rinse, repeat, lather, rinse, repeat. Like, they just do it, and they run the practice fiscally responsible. They've been fiscally responsible in running the practice, and now it's like they're just pulling the cash register. But they're delivering great patient experience. They've got a tenured team. The practice is humming. And now what happens when you run that projection of how quickly they can catch up to everybody over here that was just doing what they were in the very beginning? It's Doug. Thank you, Doug. I appreciate that. Doug's awesome, dude. Thank you for being here, Doug. I appreciate it. Now you blew my train of thought, Doug. Thank you for that. I'm just kidding. You like, if you think about that crescendo, that mountain that you climb up, you're all right, Doug. As you climb up that mountain and now you're on the backside, think of just kind of, instead of climbing up, now you just hop in the sled and you just let momentum bring you home, bring you to the finish. So Again, long explanation, but I hope it puts context and kind of puts a story behind the life cycle that we see practice owners experience in the couple of different stages of their career. Did that make sense? I hope that answered your question. Otherwise, I just wasted like 4 minutes of 5 minutes of everybody's time.
No, it did, Adam, because I think the driving points for younger doctors to kind of take to heart is like, hey, do what you got to do, focus on your craft, focus on making it happen, implementing what needs to be done to advance your career. And as you're finding these opportunities and finding ways to grow that cash flow, then you hit that point in time. And I love what you said, like the shampoo mode, right? Rinse, lather, repeat. It's kind of this point that someone hits in their career where things are kind of all like now just rocking and rolling, spitting off the cash. And then, but then also then I suppose we get into like the most tax preferred ways, like when you really start to talk about these higher dollar. So perhaps we can transition and you can speak a little bit to that. So like, when you do have a client that's spitting off $15,000 a month going into different long-term investment vehicles, how do you approach that?
So I want to put a pin in that, and I want to go back to something and ask for your thoughts and feedback on this as well, because I think this is a really important point to hammer home for ODs right now, regardless of where you're at in your practice life or in your practice life cycle. In the consulting that you do, Eric, when you find a practice owner that has where whether they explicitly say it or not, you can tell that they personally need every single dollar of revenue that practice generates to bring home to support their lifestyle. How hard is it to implement change in the practice? And how hard is it to grow the practice? How hard is it to invest back into the practice and thus help them see the change that they want, right? I'm like, if this is a wiffle ball, right? I'm teeing you up for just a home run here, but
yeah. Well, look, I mean,
I'm assuming I am.
At the end of the day, it's all about implementation. And quite frankly, I mean, look, Adam has shared with you when we've had these conversations before. We recognize that there's a ton of opportunity out there for practices across the board, right? B, there's a ton of threats out there as well, right? And through it all, it's a matter of identifying the opportunity, establishing a plan. But the biggest thing is the implementation and support there. And that's something that you can see, when you refer to doctors that may at different stages of their career have these big goals that they really want to hit. It's more a matter of providing the resources to implement the change and see it through and deliver results. And look, I mean, folks can go to the Akrinos website or hit me up one off. I'd love, we'd love to hear about your situation, because the fact is, it really does all boil down to, if we're looking at it from a standpoint of the practice as a machine and what Akrinos can do to help that machine operate most efficiently and maximize profitability. And then with your world in growing wealth outside of the practice, I mean, it really is, it can be overwhelming for many doctors, and to have the team of support around them to implement these strategies is of utmost importance.
Yeah. Well, it's something that I'm very passionate, and this comes back to something that I mentioned earlier, and I have an article coming out in Review Metric Business, shameless plug alert, in I think it'll be a week or so when this article will release, but it talks about planning life on purpose, not from a personal side, but from a business side of things. So
sure. Yes.
All of us, hopefully, and I'm going to indirectly come back and answer your question from a tax efficiency standpoint on what you do when you're kind of pulling that cash register and harvesting the cash out of the business. Because one quick thought, when you think about utilizing cash to invest in your business and grow, if you use the cash right now, yes, we can have the conversation. That's an opportunity cost, right? Translation, what could I have done with that cash and earned had I not invested it into my business, right? That's what we call an opportunity cost. So some practice owners would say, oh, you know what? I'd rather just go ahead and invest that money. I'd rather buy rental real estate, or I'd rather buy Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency or any other investment, right? Except invest it back into my practice. Here's my my counter to that. There are few investments that I or any other advisor could say that on a risk-adjusted return, which is fancy speak for saying what's the confidence that I'm going to have that I'm going to get a return on this investment, right? There are few businesses that I as an advisor could confidently recommend that can produce the return on the investment that I would make in my practice as an OD, right? If I'm an OD, or candidly in my own business. People sometimes find it weird that I don't have, like, because I'm very transparent. I share with clients what strategies I'm implementing. I don't have a really big brokerage account. I've got a buttload of cash in the sidelines for opportunities to buy and to invest back into the business, to hire and grow the team. And I've got my long-term retirement funds, and we've got our Roth IRAs and our HSAs and our 529s for our kids and all the ABCs and 123s that you might think of in retirement. But we've got some other investments that are not traditional brokerage accounts. So you have to understand, or I shouldn't say you have to understand, you should be sensitive and be cognizant of what can I exchange this dollar for in return for a future profit. And from a tax standpoint, well, I'll come back to the taxes. I want to bring us back to that article that I wrote, the on-purpose planning. In the absence of defining what makes you happy, how do you define success? Who do you spend your time with? What are you spending your time doing? How are you spending that time? Where are you spending that time? Basically, I'm talking about purpose-driven planning, right? Life planning, documenting and putting down on paper, having conversations with your spouse, your loved ones, your family, whoever it is that's important in your life, and defining, reasonably speaking, how do I define happiness? How do I define contentment? And then putting a rough dollar amount. No, I don't need to know how much you spend on Netflix. I don't need your Netflix subscription built into your budget. I don't need, tell me, Eric, what were the average utility bills of your household? And I'm like, oh my God, like, put a pencil in my ear. If any advisor's asking you to do that, respectfully, I just think that it's a colossal waste of time. Rather, define what brings you happiness, what brings you joy. And this is one thing that you as a practice owner, my dear friends, have that nobody else has. You have control over how successful you are. As an associate, all due respect to associates that are on the call right now, you have less control, and there's an exchange for that, right? You didn't have to sign a $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 note to build a practice or start a practice or buy a practice. You don't have the buck stopping with you on everything. So there is a risk reward in practice ownership. But for the ODs that are on the call that own your own practice, you have as much control as you can possibly have to create and, for lack of a better word, manifest the destiny that you want in your personal life. And then once you understand how much you need to make personally with taxes, with a savings goal in mind, now you can reverse engineer that number to figure out, how many days do I want to be in clinic? I'd like to be at a 0.8 equivalent. Okay, I want to practice 4 days a week. All right, I need to make this, and I want 3-4 weeks out of the office. Average revenue per patient or average revenue per comp exam is 380 based off last year's numbers. That means I need to, like, you can do the math and solve for joy based off of what based off of what you want your practice to provide for you personally. Because in the absence of doing that, the common denominator that people fall to is more. I just need to grow. I need to grow. I need to grow. I need to grow. It's like, well, why? Like, truly, why? If you want to grow, like, again, I'll pause there. So if you've gone through this, do you have something? Because I was actually going to get to the brokerage account and tax statement now, but.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you're hitting on something that I think is often overlooked in financial planning. It's overlooked, quite frankly, in business in general, in the modern era we live in. Like, everything is all about growth and more. And I really like how you tie it back to the why. Like, what is the purpose of this? And hey, look, and that's Akrinos' approach to all of this. I mean, at the end of the day, it's what are the personal and professional goals that one has in their practice, and then let's plug in the pieces, run the numbers, work backwards from that. So I really like how you tied it back to the individual why, what an individual's goals are. But there's a second point that you made in there that I wanted to reiterate as well. And that was, you said the interesting thing about optometry is that you look at what type of ROI you can have on investment going back into your practice, as opposed to some brokerage account day trading or whatever the flavor of the month is, if you will, but realizing that, hey, you know what? So if we've got this pool of cash, is $60,000 better spent out there in a brokerage account, or perhaps investing in a piece of equipment that, if we have the proper marketing strategy in place in the community, can net the practice, just boiling it down to where's the money best spent, and the scope of care and services that modern optometry is composed of. You'd have to have a pretty darn good broker over here watching your numbers to be able to generate the type of ROI that can be generated on
Absolutely.
investing in the practice.
Absolutely.
So,
We
good
were just
stuff.
having a conversation with a client about they're thinking about dropping 115 grand on a Pentacam AXL. And it's like, geez, now they've got some corneal specialist relationships that they're talking about. They've got one really good one. There's a couple of others in the area that this is the planning side of things, right? The best way that you can start a conversation for ODs on the call right now, if you have advisors that you're working with, I promise you, the best thing, music to an advisor's ears, is a client conversation that starts out with, so I'm thinking about doing ... I don't want to say the worst way, but a painful way to start out a conversation with an advisor is, hey, guess what we did? And it's like, please, just have a conversation. Let's just put pen to paper. Let's throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. And to your point, run the numbers and look at the ROI, because I know, Wade, right? It's, and we've had that happen where we'll have someone come on board as a client, and then we'll find out that they made some investment or they spent money somewhere 2 months before they came across, like, oh, if only we would have been able to meet with them 60 days sooner, we could have structured the deal better or done something different. But so start out those conversations. And to your point, yes, the ROI, retinal camera, new frame line, building out the optical, adding another lane, bringing in an associate, buying a second location more than, X number of miles away, depending on your all of these, you're not the first one to think about doing this. So there's no shortage of information. There's no shortage of case studies and anecdotal conversations that you can have with people like me, with people like Eric, with your peers. There's access to information is not our problem right now. So we have the blueprint for how to do that. And it's just a matter of running the numbers. And that, to your point, I'm glad you brought focus around that, because I think that's maybe where I know we're different than a lot of other advisors. And I don't want this to be a commercial for us, right? I hope it's coming across as we're providing information. But the idea here is look at your practice first as the place that you can get the best ROI. And if you've done all the things that you want to do in your practice and the practice is serving you in the way that you want it to serve you, great, check that box. Now we can go back and look at the last two remaining buckets of investing in yourself or solving for joy, right? And solving for joy translation is living your on-purpose life and taking that vacation, going to Hawaii. Doug, put your link. Put your link for your condo in Hawaii. We'll see if we can fill up your. I know Doug, so.
Well, actually, he hit the nail on the head. The challenge is in the execution, and I mean, look, whether it's financial planning, I know we come across it every day. I mean, there's no shortage of information. Thanks to the internet, we can all be an armchair expert, as it were. So there's no shortage of necessarily a plan, but it is execution. So Doug, I love you. So no, Doug, keep your chat on. I love this. Don't listen to Adam.
So if you're going to be making that investment, and we had a question of best way to contribute to an IRA. So if the question
I'm glad that's what I wanted to catch before we move to tax shelters for big dollars. Let's address that.
Yeah, so IRA and individual retirement account, there's two types of IRAs that you can contribute to. The traditional IRA is one that you're able to contribute. There's a few limitations of being able to contribute and deduct the contribution to the traditional IRA, and it has to do with whether you or your spouse are covered by an employer-sponsored retirement plan. If you're covered by an employer-sponsored retirement plan, there are income limitations as to whether or not you can contribute. If neither of you are covered, then you can make $1 million. You can contribute to an IRA and deduct that. The Roth IRA has income limitations on it as well. They are higher than the income limitations on traditional IRA. So that's kind of the first bar pass go and collect $200, so to speak. The second thing then, as far as best way to contribute, there's two basic ways that you'll see people contribute. They'll either do something called dollar cost averaging, where they'll set up $500 a month to go into a brokerage account. 500 times 12 is $6,000. That's the maximum amount that you can contribute to a traditional IRA per person per year. Other people we have a subset of our clients that we call our super mega savers. January, like the first business day in January, they fund their backdoor Roth IRAs, their HSA. Some of them even fund their 401ks, and they also do their 529s, their college savings plans. And they write 4 checks, and they're done saving for the entire year. That takes a lot of planning and a lot of intention and a little bit of weirdness, if you're in a good way, obviously, to be able to do that. But you certainly can do that. Now, as far as, so maybe that's the how, or the best way. As far as where, there's a number of online platforms that you can utilize. If you're just starting out, you could check out the brokerage platforms like Fidelity. Vanguard is another good option. Low cost investments. We are big fans of just buying as much of the market as you possibly can, as cheaply as you can. We are not brokers. We're not active traders. We're not trying to outpredict what the market's going to do. We just want to harness the power of the market and let capital markets work. So Vanguard provides low cost. Again, none of this, please don't take this as a ringing endorsement. We're not, do your own due diligence on this. Vanguard, if I had to choose, I would probably nudge towards Fidelity, just because the user interface is a little bit cleaner and easier than Vanguard. Vanguard, for the trillions of dollars literally that they have under management, their technology, it's kind of like the Titanic. Maybe that's a bad metaphor because we don't want them to sink. Really, really big ship, really, really small rudder. So it's hard to change a behemoth like Vanguard. So the technology, the interface is a little antiquated, but it still works. Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard. If you want like an automated solution, you can look at some of quote unquote robo advisors like Betterment. But again, there's a number of different options. That would be a really good place to start. And then every one of those platforms is going to have a tool to help you understand what investment is. Please don't make this mistake as a new investor, or if someone on the call is a new investor contributing to the IRA or to their investment account for the first time. Please don't think that just funding the account is all you have to do. I've seen too many account statements where I look at the balance and there's a big chunk of it just sitting in cash. You have to make the decision once the money's in the account. You have to make the decision of where and what you're going to invest that money in. And if you have questions about that, there are more than enough CSRs, customer service representatives at any of those firms that can help walk you through that process about selecting a basic investment. So
that was a pretty thorough explanation, Adam.
Like I said before, did I say this when we hit record or not? Brevity is not one of my strong characteristics, but hopefully I pack a good punch in, but hopefully it's a good exchange of value for words spoken.
I would say so. I would say so. And whoever that was that threw that question there, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it is realizing there's opportunity abounding and kind of understanding how to navigate this stuff. Sounds to me, obviously tax benefits. There's a lot of great resources to go to kind of self-manage that. So yeah. Appreciate the response to that, Adam. So now let's shift gears to, let's consider, let's see. So we've talked about starting young, however you can. We've talked also about not necessarily being in this mindset, forget the whole keeping up with the Joneses with planning. Do what you got to do, be responsible, but also have an eye to the future and have a goal in mind, right? And as we're talking about this, we're talking about getting plans in place to address that goal. So now let's talk to this population that I believe you mentioned they're kind of like in their maybe mid 40s to 60s, and they're like really, they're at the top of their game professionally as far as spitting off, growing the practice and spitting off cash out of the practice. So now what do they do when they've got gobs of money per month to be socking away? Let's talk about some of these tax strategies and other ways you go about it.
So the low hanging fruit, if you have, and this comes back, I this is one of our more popular episodes that I did on 2020 Money podcast, where I think the title of the episode was 5 reasons why I think I actually used the word hate, and I don't like using that word. It might have been a little clickbaity. Why I dislike the simple IRA for long-term practice owners. I love the simple IRA as a lily pad plan. It's a plan to get you from start to the next phase. Assuming that a practice owner graduates from a simple IRA to a 401k, the 2 biggest reasons that we advocate, well, 3 big reasons why we advocate doing that. Number 1, higher contribution limits. Simple IRA is 13,500, I believe, and now I think it's 14,000 this year. 401k went up to 20,500 in 2022. So there's a greater amount that you can sock inside your 401k. Number 2, the 401k has the ability to add a Roth provision. So you have the ability to put money into a Roth 401k. There is no Roth simple IRA. The benefit of contributing to a Roth is that those dollars go in post-tax, but now they grow tax-free. And so I always joke with younger ODs, the absolute goal of us is to get to the point of retirement and then give the proverbial, read between the lines here to the IRS every single year in retirement, because you've got all of your eggs in Roth IRA. And when you take those dollars out in retirement, you don't pay any taxes on them. So the 401k allows you to utilize Roth contributions. It also allows for a slightly higher match. And last but not least, back to your cash flow situation, you have the opportunity to make profit sharing contributions, back to kind of what I talked about at the very beginning, as a way to shelter some dollars and defer taxes. Because think about it this way: as a practice owner, Eric, to your point, at the pinnacle of your practicing career, assuming that you have lifestyle check in place, there's a pretty big disparity. There's a pretty big delta between what the practice is making in income versus what you've defined as success and what you need to make. All of this is ripe for some tax planning and ripe for maybe deferring taxes now, and then later on down the road, when we can do some systematic Roth conversions in retirement when you're in a lower tax bracket. Yes, it's going to be a bigger dollar amount because we had time for that money to grow tax deferred, but now we're in a lower tax bracket in retirement, and maybe we can do $50,000 conversions for 4 or 5 years. And even though we converted more, we still paid less in taxes than we would have if we would have taken that all home in the very beginning. You got to do the math, do the calculations. That's the beautiful thing about financial planning. It's the intersection of art. It's the intersection of the science of math and the art of the relationship. So utilizing that, those are the 4 big reasons why I really encourage any practice owner that still has a simple IRA. And if you've had that simple IRA for more than 3 or 4 years and you're maxing it out every year, please don't let the excess fees of a 401k inhibit you from moving on from a simple IRA. This is akin to being penny wise and pound foolish. Yes, a 401k is going to be more expensive than a simple IRA. At what cost? So again, I'll can tell I'm kind of passionate about this. So
yes, no doubt, no doubt.
The other options that you can consider: buy your building. If you have the opportunity to buy your building, the investment in real estate is one of the best investments that a practice owner can make. We've seen so many of our clients transition when they sell their practice, then they sell their building a year or 2 later. Tax planning strategy: never sell your building and your practice if you don't have to in the same year. Or if you do that, think about doing what's called a 1031 exchange on the sale of your building into another piece of real estate, so that you can at least defer and not have the 1-2 punch of a huge tax bill of the sale of the practice and depreciation recapture on the sale of your building all in the same year. So planning note: if any of you are thinking about retiring, selling your practice, try and split that up if you absolutely can. Well, let me rephrase it this way: build it into the terms that you're not selling the building in the same year that you're selling the practice. Only do it if you, as the owner, absolutely have to. I digress. So buy your building is a great place to start investing dollars. If you like that, you can consider investing in other pieces of real estate: commercial, residential, self-storage, multifamily, data centers. There are so many different verticals of real estate that you can get involved in. We know enough to be dangerous. What I'll do with real estate briefly on this call is I'll break it down into kind of 3 different pillars that you can look at. The one is completely hands-on. You're going out, you're working with a broker, you're sourcing the properties, and you are, in essence, directly owning the real estate. Hence why we call it direct owned real estate. The second is when you get an intermediary. You look at a syndicate, or you look at a direct placement, a private placement, something where you have an intermediary that's buying, managing, and sourcing the properties on your behalf. Yes, they have a management fee. Yes, they did get a cut. So when you stack apples to apples from a return standpoint, yes, that one's going to be a little bit lower. To which I would respond, what is your time worth as an optometrist, and what brings you joy? If seeing patients and refracting and doing patient care, opportunity costs, right? Opportunity costs on dollars, opportunity costs on time as well. The third option in commercial real estate is even more removed from that. You look at buying a REIT, a real estate investment trust. They can either be traded or non-traded. One more point on the syndicates and the private placements that I talk about. They are illiquid. It's just like you're buying the real estate. So you have to know what you're getting yourself into when you do those things. It's not like buying a stock or buying a mutual fund where I buy it today and then I can sell it tomorrow or next week or next month. Have to know the liquidity and the exit plan, the potential exit plan, because it's not always going to work out that way on the first two options that I talked about. The third one on real estate, a traded or a publicly traded real estate investment trust. It invests in real estate, but it kind of acts and behaves like a liquid mutual fund, ETF, things like that. Those are the Adam? Those are the three basic options of investing in real estate. Another thing that you can do, this one doesn't have a really big impact in the grand scheme of things, but it does matter. There's something called the Augusta Rule. Have you ever heard of the Augusta Rule?
I have not heard of the Augusta Rule, Adam.
The Augusta Rule, go figure, was put in place because people down in Augusta, Georgia would rent out their houses during the Masters and make a decent amount of money for them. And there's a rule that says if you rent out your house for 14 days or less per year, you don't have to pay taxes on any of the rental income received. So guess what every practice owner should do for their house, a couple times per year? Hold a company retreat, hold a team meeting, hold an executive leadership meeting, do something to document that you did business work at your house or at your place of residence, at a vacation home if you have one. We've had practice owners that truly do this, where they'll pay for their staff to come to their vacation home, and the practice writes a check for rental income. They cash the check as the owner of the rental income. And it's not, it's a way to, you don't pay taxes on that money. So it's a way to get, again, in the grand scheme of things, not a significant amount, but it adds up. So that's another strategy to consider. If you have kids and or you're married, consider putting family members on payroll. The first 12,000, I gotta look at my cheat sheet here. What's the standard deduction this year? $12,950. It was $12,400. Now it's $12,950. You can get to your kids. That's a standard deduction, and they will not pay a dime of federal income taxes on that. It's not a gift. You're paying them. The corporation, if you are an S corporation, will pay FICA taxes on that. So it will cost you, the corporation, 7.65% in doing that. But the last time I checked, 7.65% was still a lot cheaper than the 33% that the practice owner might pay if they brought that home. And then what you can do with that money that your children earned. And keep in mind, they have to do things to earn the money, right? You can't just give them. There has to be, you can't pay your 8-month-old baby $12,950. Like, you got to back it up. They've got to be, and there are no shortage of activities that kids can do in practices depending on the age. Cleaning the frames, dusting, vacuuming, shoveling snow, social media management, website design, email marketing. Again, there's no shortage of rules on it. But then once you pay your children, now they can use that to fund their Roth IRA. Think about, and this is one strategy that I just like to, I think I want to hammer this point home because it demonstrates the impact of what we're talking about here. This simple strategy, my friends, is generational wealth changing. Just Google future value calculator and put the numbers in and see how much money your kids would have. Let's say you have a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, and see what would happen if you did 10 years of Roth IRA contributions for them compared to what would happen if they didn't start contributing until they graduated college at the age of 22. That's what we call a tease, right? I'm not going to give you the answer because A, I don't know, and B, I want you to do a little research on your own. Go figure that. Like, that's something that is going to be generationally wealth changing for your kids. And that, I think, is the most empowering thing that we as business owners have the ability to do. It's the duty, it's the loyalty to not only ourselves, our patients, clients, the people that we care about, but the family that we support and that we love. Like, we have the opportunity to do some really, really awesome things with the practice that we own as the conduit for cash flow. And that goes for your spouse too, right? You can go put your spouse on payroll, max their 401k, help get their Social Security credits. All of those things matter. Yes, I am a fan of Social Security. I know that sounds blasphemous because everybody talks about, oh, I want to pay myself the least amount, not pay taxes. Social Security, when you do the math on it, is actually a decent ROI for the taxes that we pay, even as a business owner. The typical break even in Social Security is in your, I think it's, I used to know this number off the top of my head, way too many. I think it was like late 70s. And you have already broken even. It might even be earlier than that, where you have broken even on what you paid in Social Security and taxes versus the cumulative benefits that you receive. It's the biggest Ponzi scheme in the world, but the government created it, so it's legal. So don't shy away from accumulating Social Security benefits. Those are just a handful of some low-hanging fruit strategies that are a way to get money from the business over to the personal side, some of them more tax advantageous than others. And yeah, someone commented 1OD had his 8-year-old Edge lenses. Absolutely.
I
That's
noticed
awesome.
that. That's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah, you're building work ethic, you're building responsibility, you're spending time with your kids. I mean, what's not to love?
I hope someone somewhere was taking notes, because seriously, like Adam, when you were just going through that, it really, like, each one of those areas, extremely fascinating, and it certainly begs the question: hey, is this the right area for me? Is this the right vehicle for me? And in the context, realizing that now our time is kind of closing out here pretty shortly, just kind of reflects on everything that we've touched on. Um, there's tremendous opportunity, and no matter, quite frankly, no matter where someone is in the practice life cycle, whether you're viewing this and you're a recent grad just getting on your feet, or whether you're viewing this and you're ready for retirement to make that step, at every stage of the game, have a goal in mind, work backwards from that goal to have your plan, and implement your plan. Is that kind of like, Adam, we can kind of like start to like pull all this together? Is that kind of the basics of it?
It is. It is the one thing that I would, in the years of doing this with clients, in the coaching that I do, another one of my passions is helping other advisors. I'm involved in an advisor coaching program where we have about 150 advisors in this coaching program. The common denominator that I see in advisors and clients alike in the lack of action that they take after something like this is they don't write it down. They don't put it on the calendar. What you have to do, all of this, you could say, yep, I want to take action on this. I want to do this. I want to do this. Then what you need to do, my friends, is after this call, or I don't even care if you do it right now, because I don't see on video. So you could be on your phone and doing whatever you want, and I wouldn't know. So you're not going to hurt my feelings. Pull out your calendar, open it up on your phone, your tablet, your computer, however you're consuming what we're talking about here tonight, and find a block of time, 2 blocks of time. First block of time with, if you're married, significant other, in a relationship, block time with that person and have these conversations. Questions to ask, right? What brings us joy? What do we want to spend our time doing? What is our families? I guess you call them thought leaders, right? In the advisory space, Carl Richards talks about defining your statement of financial purpose, right? What is it that we want our money to do for our family? Define that. Have that conversation with your family. And once you have that purpose, once you have that vision that you've created, the second time that you need to block out a couple-hour block of time, at least, if not even more than that, is to do what we call strategic planning, my friends. It's business planning. It's figuring out and analyzing the numbers of the practice and saying, is what has been created and manifested over here with my practice in alignment with the conversation that I just had with my spouse, significant other, family, friend, whoever that might be, right? Is there alignment? Is there purpose? So all of what we've talked about here today might sound great. It is great, but I'm biased. But it's not going, sorry. I'm in kind of rare form tonight, so I hope it's coming across okay. None of what we're talking about here tonight is not going to happen. None of what we're talking about is going to happen unless you tell it to. Show me your checkbook, show me your calendar, and I'll show you your priorities. So I'm a big goal person. I'm a big purpose-driven individual. So I think we really need to honor that. And last but not least, well, and I want to make sure I get this in before I turn it back over to you for any closing thoughts, Eric, is if you're at the tail end of your career, I think Doug commented earlier, it's never too early and never too late. There's an old Chinese proverb, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Today. Regardless of where you're at right now in the planning phase, or excuse me, in both the planning phase and the life cycle, in your business cycle, you're never too late. You're never too late. So start that conversation. If you're thinking about selling your practice and that's something that's happening, have a conversation with your advisors 3 years before you plan on selling your practice. There's some fun planning strategies to get into, whether you're thinking about cash balance plan or sale options, structure the sale, different tools and arrows in the quiver that you can pull out. But if you're having conversations in the year that you sell your practice, it can sometimes be difficult to execute on those. So 5 years is ideal. 2 to 3 years is the best time that you can go ahead and start having those conversations with your team of advisors of what your intention is and what that timeline looks like. So I will take a breath, a swig of water, and pass the baton back over to you, Eric, for any thoughts.
That's great, Adam. As a matter of fact, I was not over here sending a text message when we were going down, but truly, like I was making note of this stuff because, and whether it's financial planning, which is your world, and just helping folks navigate that whole world, and from our standpoint, practice management. Hey, what can we do right now today to have the practice be as profitable as possible, and also do it while eliminating headaches for doctors and their teams. So in that regard, I really just do want to reiterate what your advice was, which is, y'all, it's two things. Put it on the calendar, right? 2 blocks of time. 1, have a conversation with your partner about what brings you joy, like truly define it, right? And then number 2, and I love this, it sounded like it was strategic planning. You do the analysis and you implement the plan.
And with that plan, one last point that I would make, a book that I don't want to say changed my life, but it articulated and connected the dots on everything that it's like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. When you go through this process and you have these conversations and you create your action plan, the areas of improvement that you need, right? Whatever problems that you've identified, whatever challenges that you have to overcome, yes, as the OD, there's going to be some of those that you alone are going to be responsible for executing on. But like I said earlier, no problem that you have in your practice is the first time that any OD has ever faced this problem. Who can you align with to help you solve this problem? I would rather you as an OD put more time on your watch than gold in your pocket. Time is your greatest commodity. And with more time, you can make more money, but with more money, you cannot make more time. So surround yourself with a team that can help you answer the questions the right way the first time in the most efficient time possible, or in the most efficient way possible. And then use that time to either grow the business or live life and just have fun. So
Adam Cmejla, I tell you what, man,
going.
like
it's 9 o'clock at night. I can keep going.
We're gonna have to do this again, no doubt. So now that being said, to kind of wrap things up, you're going to be at Seco here coming up in just a couple of months.
Yep, we have a booth down at Seco. I'm going to be doing a couple of. Kind of. We don't have the official schedule yet. I think we do, but I don't have it handy right now. I have a booth down at Seco. We've got a decent sized booth. We're going to be doing kind of like mini education sessions on basically the 3 tenets that I talked about earlier: proactively managing cash flow, reducing taxes, and investing prudently. So I'm going to have like a rotating schedule of little mini sessions, if you will, that I'm going to be doing down there. Vision Expo, I do have COPE approved classes that I'm going to be presenting in New York City at Vision Expo East and at West. I'll be in West in Vegas. I'm hopscotching around to a couple of state associations as well. I've got another conference that I'm going to be attending at the end of this month in Orlando. So yeah, I'm making the rounds, man. It's going to be a lot of fun. Are you going to Expo or?
So as a matter of fact, yes. So Seco this year is based right here in our headquarters town, our hometown of New Orleans. So Akrinos, we will have actually we're going to be right down the aisle from you, Adam, at booth 1633. By the way, be sure to come by the Akrinos booth. We got some great New Orleans lagniappe for everybody. We'll also be up there at Vision Expo East. We'll actually be hanging around the Techify Pavilion, which is a whole other area of really, really cool far out things you can do with tech in your practice. We'll have them on actually next month's show. Dr. Brianna Rue and Dr. Jen Tabiza will be joining us next month on Akrinos Access. But anyhow, yeah, Adam, so we will look forward to catching up with you at SECO, catching up with you at Vision Expo East. And ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of everyone here at Akrinos, my name is Eric Matei, President and Chief Vision Officer of Akrinos, signing off for this month's episode of Akrinos Access with our good friend Adam Cmejla. Adam, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate being here. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you everybody else for giving up some of your late afternoon or evening, depending on where you are, and participating. It's been a pleasure and a privilege.
All right, y'all. Have a good one. I hit stop recording. Did it stop recording?
I